Season 1 of Loki just wrapped up, and for the past few weeks, I've been watching the show and feeling a little bit like an outsider. Everyone around me seems to really like or even love it, but this whole time I've never been all that taken by the show. Don't get me wrong, I wish I was. I want to enjoy this thing as much as everybody else seems to, but I just don't. If you haven't seen the show, I'm going to remain pretty vague for the first part of this review, but I'm going to get more into spoilers further in. Don't worry though, I'll be sure to give a warning. I think the characters are probably the number one thing I can point to and say, this is what holds the show back for me from being really good. There's only two characters that I really enjoyed, and that was the titular character of Loki as well as Sylvie. I really liked the chemistry these two had and found them both to share a lot of similarities while also feeling like two distinctly different characters. Whenever it was the two of them on screen, I was either having a fair amount of fun or quite engaged by the situations they were in. But outside of that, the vast majority of the characters didn't leave much of an impression on me. While I understand what the show was trying to do with Mobius, I don't think Owen Wilson brought all that much to the table. And his interactions with Loki were fine, but the humor that the show wanted me to enjoy just fell flat. I'm sorry to the Mobius fans, but for me that character did not work as well as the show wanted him to. Ravonna is certainly not a bad character, and is well performed by this actor, but just by the nature of the role that she performs, you don't get terribly much of an understanding of her character until further into the show. And once you've got a better idea of where she's coming from, that definitely adds an interesting layer, even though it didn't fully bring me around to her. I'd say that of the supporting characters who show up in all or most of the episodes, she's probably my second favorite behind Sylvie. And other than that, I guess there's Hunter B-15? Kind of? But I mean, what does she really get in terms of character moments or an understanding of who she is and why she does what she does? Well, not very much, because that's not her function within the story. Like with Ravonna, you get a little bit more further in, but unlike that character, it doesn't add much in terms of making me enjoy and empathize with her. Fortunately, Loki and Sylvie were pretty enjoyable to me, especially together, and that certainly helped me to actually have a fun time watching this miniseries. Unfortunately, they were the only characters that stood out for me, which meant that so many of the people that surrounded them didn't enhance my enjoyment of the story. Characters are pretty important to me, and if you can really nail your characters, I think it enhances every aspect of the experience, because the audience has this understanding of them and this connection, so if you can nail that, it really helps to make the rest of the experience that much better. And I'm sorry to say that I don't believe they did. Even the main two weren't great characters, they were just pretty good and entertaining to watch. And importantly, I felt like I understood them and where they were coming from. This leads us directly into the story, because even if the characters aren't the best, a really investing story can be a big help for fairly obvious reasons. These are the events that you see portrayed on screen, and while I'm having a difficult time pinpointing why the story took so long for me to become invested in it, there are a couple of reasons that come to mind. Also, here's your spoiler warning, you can skip to this time if you have not finished Loki. I'd think that with only 6 episodes and them all being in the 45-minute range, it wouldn't be hard to make a story that is intriguing, investing, and flows naturally across this season. Or, more accurately, it would probably be an easier task than filling 13 episodes, like in those Netflix Marvel shows. But the way the story is broken down just feels a little bit too reliant on characters that I don't actually like all that much. I mean, episode 5 could have told its story in half the time very easily. So why is it about 45 minutes? Well, because it lets you have fun with these characters and these different variants of Loki. And it is a little bit of fun, but I also don't really care about any of them, and I thought it really dragged down the pacing of the season as it was leading into the finale. That's just one example though, but it happens plenty of times throughout the show. I understand wanting to take time to showcase the characters, because otherwise how our audience is going to care about what's going on, that's why they're called characters, and while for me that generally works with Loki and Sylvie, when it came to the other ones, because I never connected with them, and in some cases they were barely developed, the scenes with them didn't add to my experience. I don't want to say this story shouldn't have been made on television, because at the end of the day, I don't think that was really the problem, but I do think that the specific way they chose to balance the characters and the story didn't connect with me as much as if they had A, developed these supporting characters just a little bit more, added a little something to help me understand them better, or B, put less emphasis on the characters that didn't add much value. And conceptually, the story is fairly interesting, and especially the further into these 6 episodes I got, the more engaged I was by it. A time agency snatches Loki? Alright. He has to work with them to find a criminal? Okay, this feels kind of familiar. But the criminal is a variant of him, and the two share a bond together and work to take down this time agency and get to the bottom of what's actually going on here. You know what? I like that. That is a fairly interesting story to follow. And that's how I felt about a good portion of this season. It was fairly interesting, and I enjoyed the main character and Sylvie. The first 2 episodes were definitely the dullest for me with all the exposition and Mobius scenes. I just didn't get all that much from them. But beyond that, I started to enjoy this adventure a lot more, and the 3 episodes that followed all had a fair amount to offer. But I do think that this season, especially in its first 5 episodes, really needed to be tweaked a fair amount for this to be a genuinely solid season of television. You could have just made it a bit shorter and gutted some of the stuff that just added very little. I mean, sure, that would have helped. However, beyond that, if I was just more invested in these supporting characters, it really would have helped to make this thing work better for me. So to me, they are one of the weakest links of this thing and do hold it back from being really good. And there was only one point at which I found myself fully invested in the show, and that leads me to the finale. The episode For All Time, Always. This was genuinely really well put together and just thoroughly captivating. It almost shouldn't work. Having this guy kind of monologuing for a fair amount of time and getting out this exposition to our characters, I mean, that should be a dull scene, but I think because this actor has a solid presence on screen, it really helped to make the whole episode work that much better. The conversation they have is so engaging as you learn about the different timelines and what will happen if they kill this guy. And I fully bought the different perspectives between Loki and Sylvie. And the stakes of the episode are quite high, so as they are having this very important conversation about whether or not they should kill this person, you know that whatever decision they make, it's not going to be ideal because either something else bad will happen, or these same bad things will continue to happen. The finale is just very well put together and is enhanced a lot by how much I genuinely enjoy these characters. Because if I didn't really care about them, then I wouldn't be all that invested during these conversations and as they are fighting about whether or not to kill this dude. The place that the audience is left is a great little moment because it shows that this person, who was in charge of everything, was not lying, and that all of the bad things he promised would happen are going to be seen as the story continues. It really worked for me both as a cliffhanger and just as a moment where our main characters are certain about what's going to happen, but uncertain about what they can do to stop it. The episode was by far my favorite of the 6 and showed me that when the show is done right, I can really find enjoyment in it and be very invested in the story. And I am really appreciative of that because it proved to me that this show can be for me, and that even though I didn't enjoy it as much as many seem to have, there is stuff in there that I really like. I hope that continues into its 2nd season, and I enjoy that one a lot more than I enjoyed this one, but only time will tell. Overall, I found Loki's first season to be pretty good, if ultimately a little disappointing considering its potential and lead character. Both Loki and Sylvie are pretty good. I think the story is engaging and fairly interesting. Unfortunately, it does suffer from the pacing of these episodes across this season and how little I got from much of this one's supporting cast. I would never call this season outright bad, and as said, I enjoyed a fair amount of what it gave me, but unfortunately it never came together to be anything particularly special, despite some elements that worked for me and made the experience worth watching, especially in that final episode. I had an enjoyable time with this one, and I'm going to give Loki Season 1 a rating of 7.25 out of 10. And that does it for today. Be sure to leave your thoughts on this show down below if you feel like sharing. I know a fair amount of you are going to disagree with me, which I am perfectly okay with so long as you are civil in your discussions. I hope to see you around soon for future videos and reviews, but if not, that is totally cool. Just know that I appreciate your time here today, and with that said, thank you very much for watching, take care, and have a lovely week.